It's Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, working later, so I don't just get dressed up for you.
Yeah. I was telling you're very, very well dressed.
Mm. Sunday is our inventory day, so I go in a little bit
Okay.
earlier than normal, but I get
Okay.
off early, so
I understand.
yeah,
Good.
awesome. How's it going in Chile?
It's doing quite well, it's the winter is arriving now, so but I cannot tell you very much. I am arriving from Italy, so I wasn't here for 2 weeks.
We're in Italy. Where you at?
I was working in different places in Sicily, then I was up to Milan, and then down to Montalcino, and then Bulgaria.
Very busy man.
When I travel, I am very busy. I mean, I have like two lives, When I am in Chile, my winery is not that busy, and then when I am consulting, I am traveling. I make it really, I make it count. Every day is a working day for me for two
Yeah.
weeks.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the nice way to split up your life, right? It's best to be orderly and kind of peaceful at home. That way you can actually go and work and do the things and go hunt and then come back in peace.
Yeah, it's a difficult. The rhythm as a consultant is as a terror consultant is a difficult one because it's quite physical. It's very mental because you need to work with your clients. You need to understand your client in a way that a viticulturist cannot do or a winemaker cannot do because you become both for them. And you need to understand really very well what they want, what they look for, what they fear. It's very mental. And then is you're talking in another language for 2 weeks. In Italy, you need to work in Italian. If you speak English, it won't work very well because you will never get the real connection to the people. And then you spend the day in the vineyards, in the hills, and then you go down to the winery, you try the wines, then you go for dinner in the night. So it's very difficult 2 weeks. Super funny, but tough.
Sure, yeah. And anyone who doubts that hasn't traveled much for work. Even just this sheer act of going somewhere else, not having your food, not having your bed, like it adds up. It really does.
And Chile is far away as well. So every,
Yeah. What's that flight like?
oh, it's horrible.
Yeah.
It's not only the flight, it's the jet lag after that, and then you arrive to somewhere and then you need to work. So you land in the morning, in the afternoon you are in the vineyards.
Yeah, you haven't slept in 36 hours. Let's go dig some holes and let's go see what the vineyard's made of. Yeah.
Sure. So it's the most difficult part is flying. It's far away. I mean, at the moment I leave my house and I open the door in the hotel somewhere, it's 24 hours basically.
A full day. Yeah.
It's a full day. Yeah.
Well, before we just end up talking all day without actually talking about what we came here to talk about, why don't we just jump in if that's cool? So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah,
So
Pedro, thanks for coming here and giving us a moment of your time. You are an author, respected terroir consultant, and winemaker, so much more. So I thought we could start off with a question that I thought I would love to hear your perspective on.
Mhm.
There are people in the world of wine, not the majority, but not an insignificant minority, that have claims of terroir not even existing, of it being kind of made up. Minerality is just kind of our boogeyman that we believe in, even though, like, what is your perspective of that? And I'm sure you have like 2 or 3 hours you could go there, but I wanted to see what you thought.
That has been a topic, in my life, my career from the beginning, just the beginning. So, and it's quite normal. There are views about everything in the planet. Politics, I believe on Trump. I don't believe on Trump. I believe on Macron. I mean, you find everywhere. It's the normal. I will be scared if everybody will believe about terroir. And at the same time, people, the general people, they need to have prove it to me. And how do you prove it? It's very difficult to prove through numbers. I did a PhD in Paris for 4 years, and the result of my PhD was that I could never prove it through numbers. What I was tasting, at what the winemaker was tasting was very evident from the worst wine to the top cuvée, but the numbers were showing the same thing, basically, So, and so at the same time, you have this conversation about the minerality doesn't exist, proof that the minerals in the soils are in the wine. And so far, we had never proved it, and people, people who does research are interesting people, but very arrogant. They are claimed to be very intelligent, that's why they are PhD. And they always, and that is something that scares me, if they don't prove it, the problem, so the result, it means that it doesn't exist. But they are never open to the idea that they didn't find a way to prove it. So, when you fail, you say it doesn't exist. It doesn't. You never say I failed. I didn't find a way to prove it. Maybe in 10 years we're going to get a new machine or something, and everything is going to be proved wrong. So there is a lack of faith, and there is about ego. There is a lot of ego in wine, egocentric people. And so it's very easy to go out and people would say minerality doesn't exist, terroir doesn't exist. And then you pour a glass of wine with them and they don't know how to drink. They don't know how to taste. So to me, I would love to have a conversation like that with somebody who is in front of me. But first, somebody who shares a wine culture and who can taste a wine, And I remember going to some seminars, when I was younger about terroir. And I was impressed that the people doing research, they didn't drink wine. And so how are you, and that is a classical problem about wine. People, what is a terroir consultant? I can bring the guy who is the pedologist, but the pedologist looking about soil. The geologist is looking about rocks. We need somebody who's looking about the wine. It's not about rocks. It's not about soil. It's about wine.
If you're selling the rocks, then sure. But
of course. Yeah. I mean, it's the final result of everything is a bottle of wine, And I don't care, when people say we are in Chablis and this is Kimmeridgian jewelry. What means Kimmeridgian jewelry? Kimmeridgian is a time, So that's why there is a lot of bullshit, in my opinion, on wine around, And it's difficult to go outside and, you can be targeted as a polemic or Pedro says something, I don't care. I'm far away in Chile.
Thank you all for listening. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go to servesyouRightPod.com. We have all the old episodes on there, and you can sign up for our newsletter and all sorts of other fun things. Glad you're listening. All right, back to it.
But that is the problem about terroir, and minerality. First, prove it through wine.
Yeah, I like your wine first approach. I really like your framing there too. That not that maybe it doesn't exist, but don't have the arrogance to say it doesn't exist. Have the humility to say I was unable to find it. Because I'm going to just bastardize this, but I heard this really great analogy somewhere where science, in a lot of ways. And the analogy is, imagine a scientist trying to study an orchestra to figure out where good music comes from. And they're just looking at the instruments and taking them apart and looking at, and then you have one scientist up here is like, look, we found some sheet music. Like, what is that? It's like they're missing the point where it's kind of an emergent property of when people are there with the instruments, with the sheet music. But as you go into all these little details, you're not finding music when you take apart the violin and look at the strings. And it's like we couldn't find it, so music must not exist. That's not really how they approach that.
It's a philosophical and conceptual problem all around. And I think the mistake is that you should you should start from the end. The conversation should start with a bottle of wine. And then you go back. And not from a soil, and then you go forward, That is the problem. And if terroir doesn't exist, it means that Burgundy classification doesn't exist. And if you agree that Burgundy classification is bullshit, then we have a problem. So, and you will understand that just trying the wines and tasting the wine. So again, people who claim that terroir minerality doesn't exist, is people that I first should really improve the tasting, and then we can have a discussion. And I understand, minerality is a difficult word that create confusion, is polemic because, again, goes to minerals and prove it. And I stopped using minerality 10 years ago, and I use energy. Energy,
yeah.
electricity,
Vibrancy
vibrato.
sort of thing, yes.
And then at the moment you switch and you use another word, the discussion is finished. Yeah, you're right. This wine has a lot of energy. And
that kind of ties with the Psalms' kind of love of the words like Kimmeridgian. They maybe don't understand what that refers to, but it is undeniable to say that Chablis tastes like a thing. And so, like, as we search for what's unique about it, we hear and read this word Kimmeridgian. It's like, that must be it. It's...
Yeah. But that's correct. I mean, Kimmeridgian is a moment of time. Like saying today, So we're tasting today. But today you have different todays because my today in Chile is very different from your today and the today in India and everything. So that's Kimmeridgian. So and then it's going to relate to some kind of limestone that happens in that area. But I can show you, if you come with me to Chablis, in the same place, I can show you horrible limestone. And you will say, this is not tasting like Kimmeridgian, but it is Kimmeridgian. So on the other side, I understand very well because, the market is we make wines difficult to explain, to talk, and Kimmeridgian is a very simplistic, very clever way to say, wow, this wine tastes like Kimmeridgian. But it's not true. But it works, Or I amaze, volcanic wines. They have like a hype, about volcanic wines. People have no idea what means a volcanic rock, but volcanic wines are sexy, I'm doing volcanic wines. But, 70% of my work on volcanic wine has been in horrible terroir. So again, it's a word that can be used to explain something, but then it's far away from the reality, And nobody wants to know. Even me, I don't want to know the reality,
Well, the world of wine is so complex that any kind of simplification that you can do is kind of useful if your goal is to get more people to drink wine. Because there are a lot of people that, when they see the complexity of wine, reach for the beer or scotch. It's like, okay, I'll have a martini. This, And I'm glad that we brought up Chablis, because I feel like I've always thought that blind tasting is the strongest counter argument to, like, terroir does not exist. Just like you start with a wine in mind. No matter who you are, no matter what price point, Chablis does taste like something. And you have people all over the world who, even without trying specific producers, specific plots of land, can pull out reliably Chablis from a blind tasting. So there has to be something, even if we don't know it,
But the great places have, you go to another concept that is super interesting and is typicity. And when you have something unique, so you go to a definition of a terroir, a place in three-dimensional place between the weather and everything, that creates atypicity. And that typicity is something that has something. I personally call that a sound, like musicians. You listen to Sting, and in 1 second, Roxanne is Sting. And because they have a sound, and great musicians have a sound that makes them very recognizable. But some places in the planet have that. Not many, And the main problem to me, Andrew, is that, like for everything in the planet, you have a very important difference between what is popular and what is not popular, what is more niche. So I don't think the wine industry is on crisis. To me, it's an evolution. And if we're going to talk about wine, we should start to make a separation, because there are big companies making, wine for every day, for everybody. That's one kind of problem. And then we have artisanal small producers, the niche, that are going to make wine for the 1 or 2% of the population that has this kind of different interest in wine. It's very related when you talk to, and I talk a lot to, people in this. It's where I work. I work in the niche. And I talk a lot with consumers, I do many seminars around. It's people who is around culture, around music, art, around cinema. It's very easy to have a conversation in that way because it's not only wine, it's something around them that is also a little niche. So is the artisanal wine production on crisis? Is a very different question that the rest of the wine production on the planet on crisis. I just came from we spent 3 days. We have a group of friends. For many years, we spend 3 days together every year in one place on the planet. And we talk and we share about how we're feeling, what are our problems as producers. So we all produce wine. And they're all small, all what I would say, the niche artisanal. We share the same view, same passion in different places. So people from US, Argentina, Chile, France, Italy, Spain. And nobody's on crisis. I mean, you don't have 3 years of waiting list now waiting for your wine, but you're selling everything. And even if the prices are jumping up, especially for Barolo or Burgundy or Champagne, but it's a different discussion. Is the basic population who drinks more simple wines that they don't want to listen to something complicated like Kimmeridgian. They cannot even pronounce Kimmeridgian. Those people are in one part of the condition and problem. And then the other people, the niche people talking to the local audience that they really love to know about Kimmeridgian. It's about, if you listen to Taylor Swift, she is the most similar thing to an industrial winery. But if you listen to John Coltrane, that is the niche. So it always amazed me, that if you want to have a good ticket to listen to Taylor Swift, you need to pay like $400. But if you go to the Village Vanguard in New York to listen to the best guy playing jazz, you pay $40 and you are in front of the guy. So what's the difference between $40 in a place that can hold 250 people or to pay $400 to listen to Taylor Swift or whatever, So it's two different planets. And that goes to sommeliers, that goes to restaurants, that goes to food, that goes to sport, that goes to everywhere. It's two very different communities. So we're talking we're making wine very difficult for that kind of community. The niche community loves the difficulty of wine,
Yeah.
So that is two different discussions.
I love that we brought up Taylor Swift in this conversation. I'm also reminded...
I did it because I was working in Australia. I could not find a hotel, in Adelaide. Everything was booked in the whole city.
Yeah.
And why? What is happening? Say Taylor Swift is coming. They said, who is Taylor Swift? So they look at me like, you don't know who is Taylor? No, I never heard. So yeah, that's I remember always that name.
That's awesome. I'm reminded of Mark Twain's quote, "Everything popular is wrong." It seems to fit here. Just so we can start and make sure we talk a little bit about the book, I think a kind of fun entry point is why is sound so tied to wine in your mind? Because it's the first time I've ever read a book that, pretty much each chapter is tied to a song that like sums it up. And I thought that was a really interesting stylistic choice.
It comes from my beginning, as a young guy. I used to play the saxophone.
Alto sax for me. Yeah.
Tenor and alto, both.
Awesome.
Both. I love tenor more than alto, but I found alto more easy. So I switched to alto because tenor was really difficult.
Maybe I'm lazy. Who knows?
Yeah, saxophone has a sound, I think. It's a way to express something that comes from your interior. And my professor, I was like 23 or 24. And my professor was a brilliant guy, here, difficult. Again, niche guy, very particular, weird guy. And he was always talking to me and pushing me, to find, and he was using words that for me in the beginning were, what is that guy saying, You need to create a sound. You need to develop tension. You don't have complexity. You don't have a grip in your sound, So he used to repeat these kind of words. a lot about the process of making music. And then when I was in the beginning of my career with different people in wine, people were using the same words, you know. This wine is about tension, 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 and the grip of the wine. We need Barolo needs it's all about grip, you know. And then you go to Burgundy and it's balance and complexity.
Finesse, yes.
Finesse, you know, and to have a sound, express yourself, you know. I mean, I found that between music and wine there is many connections, you know, and because I am a frustrated musician, I ended up being a wine consultant and a wine producer. Looking back my life today, I should be an architect. I love architecture, you know, and I am a frustrated architect as well. And I found that connection very early in my career. And then my wife has that idea, you know, to name my wines following jazz musicians that I like. So she says to me one day back in 2016, she said, try your wine blind. I will put all the wines blind and tell me what you feel and what musician will match that feeling that you have, you know, about complexity, tension, grip, these kind of words. And that's how all my crew wines have nicknames of jazz musicians. And that's how it started, you know. And then with my clients, we talk a lot about, you know, found the typicity, you know, and I bring to the table, you know, because you have a sound. I was talking to them. So for them in the beginning, and everybody's looking for a sound. So I worked for 10 years now with Domaine Rouleau. So the wines from Jean-Marc Rouleau are wines that are very distinctive, you know, and people claim that it's because he harvests earlier or green, or it's because he used a lot of sulfites in the wine. So that's technical, you know, and no, it's not like that. Everybody can do that. Everybody can start to harvest 1 week early. So let's copy that. Everybody can add sulfites everybody's doing sulfites in Burgundy.
It's still not Rouleau, yeah.
So why the wine is different? And it's because the guy finds somehow a sound. You know, he likes his personal sound. And what I claim, and I talked a lot to Jean-Marc about, is he has a sound because he's an actor and he's not a winemaker, you know? Because normally the sound comes with imperfections, and winemakers always look for perfection, you know, the number, to correct the nature. And when you're not a winemaker, you have no idea about that. The numbers means very little to you, you know? And so you are a free mind. And when you're a free mind, you are able to trespass the boundaries of what is good or bad, and then you start to find in a sound. And it's very much what happens again with jazz musicians. The great guys never attend the university. They were made by themselves, you know. Today, you can go to fantastic programs. Berklee School is the best one in jazz. But the musicians that come from Berklee, they are perfect. They're incredible. They can do everything. But you listen to them, something's lacking. And the lack is that they don't have a personal sound. They sound mathematical, you know?
Yeah. No, there are a couple different responses I want to give to that whole thing. A couple of things that popped in my head when you were saying that. I'm thinking about a dystopian future that we all learned in high school. And I don't know if this book is popular in Chile, but Brave New World. And Brave New World, it's all, everything in the future is perfect. And we're all, you know, we all take these pills and we're all happy all the time. And
sure,
that is the dystopian future. Without the chaos or the disorder, you are lacking something. Yeah. And I do like that image of jazz, because there is that improvisational element that, yes, comes from technical proficiency. Because if you don't have the ability to know what the scales and to know what the different musical theories are, you're just going to sound like chaos. But it is accepting those imperfections. It's accepting that individuality. And the last thing I'll say on that note is, you know, Alice Feiring's been on this show, and she's very influential, mostly in the natural wine world. But one of her big things against one of her first books, when she's talking about Parker, is, you know, finding these people that are doing traditional methods and defending the fact that they don't want to upgrade their winery. She describes it as, you know, Upgrading the winery and improving the equipment won't necessarily lead to better wines. It will only for sure lead to more consistent wines. And there is a safety in that because people like to have consistency and they like to trust what they have. But you have someone like Rouleau, like the slight edges are the point when you get to that niche market, like you're saying. You know, you don't want a perfectly produced wine, or else you're going to go to, like, you know, it's not perfectly produced, but like Yellowtail, you know, there is an extreme consistency. You know what you're getting with every bottle, and the millionth bottle will be like the first.
You know, that's a concept I also talk a lot with my clients. Again, it's conceptual. That comes from jazz again. There is a record made by a great saxophone player called Joe Henderson, and that record in the 60s under the Blue Note record company. And the name of the record is In and Out, you know. And jazz is all about create tension, and you create tension throughout. And you play on the in, so the scales, and then you start to open the system and you create out. And you create tension, and you go back in and out all the time. So to me, the great producers are the people who understand that without explaining. They don't know they're doing out, you know. They're doing what their stomach, their guts are telling them to do. But many of the great wines have this balance between in and out. And the out is always imperfection. So the most common out, you know, there's some outs that people are using more and more, without naming out, but sulfur. We use minimal sulfur, you know. So natural wine producer, they're going to minimal or zero sulfur. Very a la mode today telling you, I am doing 0-0. So that's one out, you know. Clearly, the whole clusters is another out, you know. Leaving the barrique is another out. So you and that's when I was telling you to be a consultant is difficult because it's mental. It's because it's not about the rock. It's how you interpret the rock in the in and out system to create a sound. You see how philosophical everything is? So we're talking in and out and sound. And what is that basically? And when you look, you know, wineries. So people, and again, there is two kind of people drinking wine, you know. You have a winery. I will give you two examples. You have a winery that is quite on perfection. It's called Monfortino, for example. The top wine is Conterno in Barolo. And then you have the imperfection side. That will be Rinaldi or Acomaso, these are people. So those people that are doing very long macerations, basically, they're doing very long macerations because there is something they want to create or build in the wine. Of course, when you spend 90 days with long macerations, something is happening in the tank.
You can feel it, yes.
Yeah. So if you want to create that sound, you need to go through the risk of being 90 days under a long maceration. And that will bring or may bring volatile, for example, especially in the early days. Today, we can battle that way better, but in 20 or 30 years ago, that was a potential issue, you know. So what do you want to do? Are you happy dealing with volatile to get 90 days on long maceration to create your sound? Or you do very short maceration, you don't have volatile, and you create a wine that is very good but doesn't have your sound. So that is a classical balance. And when you have very long macerations, in some years you can have Brettanomyces as well. So if that wine, Acomaso, has a volatile and has a touch of Brettanomyces, so is that wine a horrible wine at the same time with a strong sound? And it's a good question. And I remember 1 year ago, June 4th, I was here at home. I was in the winery 1 hour from here with two friends of mine, very good clients and basically very good friends of mine from Spain, Comando G. So, and we were in the night in the winery, you know, having dinner and listening to music. And I was blind tasting them on jazz for fun. And blind tasting them on wine as well for fun. That was a funny night. And Lorenzo Acomaso came. The wine was super high volatile. I have no idea how much, 0.9, 1 something. It was the best wine of the night, you know. If you understand that volatile is something that sometimes happens. And if you don't have a problem with that, then you go through another dimension in your tasting. So then that is when you create a wine. This year, the best bottle was Pierre Auvernois Sauvignon, old bottle. It was, that wine created an emotion on me. And I am not a guy that you can say Pedro is a natural wine lover. No. In fact, I don't like natural wines. In 90% of the cases, I don't like natural.
They're definitely saying something, but yeah.
But there are people, where the terroir is incredible. And the intellectuality or the guts of the guy creates something that trespass, natural wine or not natural. You have something beyond that. And that is rare on the wine production. I hate the word wine industry. In the wine production, there are not many people, with a sound. The other day I was thinking, sit here, I want to write a book about atomic people on wine.
Yeah, can you explain that more? Yeah.
Yeah, so that group that we met every year, we call it Atomic. So it's because for many years, when a terroir is exceptional, I use the word atomic. That terroir is atomic. And so that the word was going through my friends, and then we created this Atomic group in 2019 in Oregon, I think. And as I was mentioning to you, we sit, for 3 days somewhere. This year was in Sicily 2 weeks ago at Ariano Chipinti's winery.
Good winery, yes.
Yeah, I was impressed. Fantastic. I mean, I was.
We even have it on our list in Omaha. Yeah.
That would be that's a podcast. That would be an incredible podcast because she has achieved something that I haven't seen anywhere in the planet. From nothing basically. So anyway, we were for 3 days in Sicily, all the group, and talking about sound and in and out and the point of light of the wine, different conceptual things, and the evolution or the crisis on the wine, and the sales and the distributions and terroir. So many different conversations. And so, and because I finished the second edition of the book, so now that edition is going to go to print, I hope, next week. I hope.
Nice.
It's difficult to finish, because you start to read again and you always found something and you read again and it's a never ending. You need to end someday. Anyway, and I was thinking, I really like I enjoy myself, writing at home here in my office. So the music, sit, calm, coffee, tea, wine, and write, and I am blessed because I am in a position of somebody who has something to say, because you travel the whole planet and you work with fantastic people. That's why atomic people, atomic wines, atomic people, and that's how I got the idea to make an atomic people of wine, new book. That is not about terroir itself, it's about interpretation, like a musician. And I realized that some people that I really love to talk to are dead. And because people is dying, basically, some great people are dying. And I was thinking I would love to have a chapter of Soldera. Gianfranco Soldera was a crazy, weird person, with an incredible wine, with volatile again. And I have no idea if he was conscient about, have a volatile some years, or he didn't care. And Soldera passed away, and then Rinaldi passed away. And Auvernois is already alive, but it's old. And you got people in everywhere, to me, Rich is a fantastic wine in US. And there is somebody behind that. So, and that somebody is retired. So I would love to have, conversations with those people, about how they got the inspiration. It's like, again, music. How you got the inspiration to create The Dark Side of the Moon. And sometimes when you listen to the guy said, we didn't, we just sit and we play something and blah, blah, blah. But there is no record about that.
Yeah.
There is no, if you talk Aubert de Villaine, there is you won't find a deep interview about, his vision about Romani Conti,
Sure,
So,
sure.
so we talk the whole day about those people, over de Villain, Romani Conti, but when there is no podcast, there's silence, and on music is the same thing. Miles Davis died, and there's not many information about that. So I want to write that book, about selecting 10, 15 guys in the planet and spend 2, 3, 4 days with them to get the brain of and the emotions of those people, in a book.
Oh, that would be awesome. That's like a collection of heroes for any aspiring viñedo out in the world. Just like, okay, this is how
And
someone has done it.
people, Andrew, when I travel, especially to sell my wines, I get to talk to many sommeliers, especially in US. They are hungry for histories about that. Sommeliers in the past used to travel because they could afford that. Young sommeliers, they never travel. They don't have the time or the money to travel. So they're selling Barolo, or they're selling La Loire or wherever, but they never got the chance to visit or met the people. So basically, they're selling wines through what they found in internet or what they can read somewhere. And I think, if I can help that a little, that's Terroir Footprints is about that. Was about that. I wanted to share with the sommelier community and with winemakers and viticulturists. I wanted to share a history that has to be technical sometimes, but it's a history of 20 years traveling and talking to great people. And that's how the book, sold so well. That book was released only in US, basically, because I don't have publisher, I don't have distribution in Europe or UK or Asia or Brazil. I know nobody. And I sold that book through a client of mine in Oregon who was selling the book like a bottle of wine. And I sold 3,000 copies in US in 2 years. And
Yeah.
I remember one day, 3, 4 years ago, I was working with my distributor in New York and said, Pedro, this morning we're going to do this, and this. And we're going to start with something that is difficult, but we're going to do it. It's called 11 Madison Park. So, okay, we go to first time for me. So, and I was quite nervous because I know it's a great place for wine, and they will never bring a Chilean wine. It's impossible. And I remember when I arrived, the whole group of somms, there were 8, were waiting, and 4 of them with the book to be signed. So when you see that, you're going to sell the wine. I mean, if 4 of the team
Hopefully.
are hopefully.
Yeah.
And the wine came to 11 Madison Park, and that's the way. And my wines went to Le Bernardin with Aldo, then later, and then Grammar through the sommelier community, because people is hungry for information and histories, and I love to share.
Well, I think the thing that your book really does well is there is that urge to simplify, because we are front facing to the guest, and there's no way I can have a 30-minute conversation with each guest. There just aren't that many hours in the day, but it really does give a clear indication of just the complexity of the subject. When even like I'm thinking back to the section when you're talking, and I forgot the name of the process, but the process where you map out the different characteristics of the vineyard, and you even mentioned unless you know how to read these maps, it's useless. Kind of
Yeah.
I think it's like ICR or some.
Yeah.
It was an abbreviation.
ICM,
but
electromagnetic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just even the expert and someone that we'd consider world class in this is still saying this is complex for me. And it's okay, if the guy who went and got the PhD is confused about these topics, or at least willing to admit the complexity of these topics, then we can just fully admit that there is a lot here. There's a lot more than you'd expect.
Sure.
Yeah.
It is like that. I remember when I was doing the PhD back in 2002 in Paris. My professor came, with a map. He said, this is a new technology, it's called electromagnetic, conductivity or resistivity, it's the same. And wow, it's incredible. We can see the soil now through the electricity. But it doesn't work really well so far. That was back in 2002. So now we're 2026, technology has improved. But again, and this is a difficult part when I talk to my clients, because it's not that the machine will cost you $50,000 to $100,000. So everybody can buy the machine. Many people in different places of the planet have that machine. It's a money problem. The problem come next, because you need to, every time you work the machine, you need to tune up the machine, like music again. And then you need to know how to read the vineyards, because the machine is going to give you numbers. And the numbers means electricity. But two different geologists, for instance, may have a same number, but it will mean different things for wine. So that means that the guy who's making the lecture should have an instinct about when to have one file, or have two files or three files, trying to read when there is a change in the vineyard. And that is experience. And then you need to classify the numbers. And that's another, is experience again, because I was explaining my client in Montalcino last week, we have numbers. We were 6 people in the table, and we need to classify the people. But you have many ways of classifying that. Let's say we classify following the color of the eyes. So now we have 3 groups. But if we change and we say, okay, but we classify on the countries. And when we have 3 countries in the table, and then you change, you say, okay, now we're going to classify male or female. We have 2 countries on the table. So there is a criteria to classify the numbers that will change everything. That is called geostatistics. And so the company who does that is a company that I have been working for 22 years. They knew very little in the beginning. Now, after 22 years, they're by far the leading company in the planet doing that, because they know how to read the place and to classify. And when the classification doesn't work, that happens, I will phone them and I will say, can you reclassify, but don't use the color of the eyes? Can you use the height of the people? Oh, of course, Pedro. And then they reclassify, and then until I found a match, And that's why you need to do holes. We call that pits in the vineyard, to get the match between the map and the reality in terms of the terroir. And I remember a conversation back in 2011. I was in Bordeaux. And one guy from a very famous chateau came to talk to me, very gentle. And he said, Pedro, we use electroconductivity, but the results are horrible. And I was impressed, because on gravels, it works really well, in fact. And I asked them, how so? What happened? And he said, no, nothing much. It's a complete chaos. And I asked the guy, and okay, how many pits you did in the vineyard to match and to reclassify? And he said, pits? We never did pits, Pedro. I mean, you cannot use the tool without pits, And
it's going to the doctor and getting a fMRI and not getting your blood drawn. It's like, okay, well, something's happening, but not really sure what.
It's the same thing, It's the scanner in the hospital. And you need to have the scanner, you need to have the guy who runs the machine, and you need to have the doctor who is able to read the machine.
And it is also as useless in my hands as as it's useful in a doctor's.
Of course. So that's part of the difficult part of what I do, that I try to make it simple for my clients. They don't need to know, what is geostatistics. They understand very easy in the table when I explain how we classify people. And so they understand immediately. It's the difficult part of the consultant. You need to have the ability to make something difficult simpler and fast, because they're paying you per day. So your client wants to have something back, often. Every coffee is give me something back. So you need to find a way to explain them, something, and how that something relates in the wine. That is the funny part for me, and that is a tricky part, because you need to start asking questions to the owner, the winemaker. How are you doing the wine? Why? So people don't like the white part, So, no, I do that, and then the pumping overs. And why? And they look at me, what means why?
That's how we do it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so how we do it, basically. And so that opens a fantastic conversation, that comes with the work.
I do fear that we may have put the cart before the horse, and I was hoping for the listener of the show, could we do a very quick, brief recap of how you got into the world of looking at soils, wine, just kind of how you got your chops in this business?
It's super weird. I wanted to be a jazz musician. I got my saxophone. I was fluent on French because my mother offered me an education in a French school. So when I was 26, I wanted to move to France to go to a next level on jazz. Of course, if I tell my mother I'm moving to France to be a musician, my mother, who was a lawyer, would say, no, I won't help you.
Reasonable.
So,
yes.
Of course. So I got a grant from the French government to make a master degree in Montpellier. And so I was moving to France to have a master degree in agriculture in Montpellier and following jazz lessons to become a professional jazz musician. That part ended very fast. In Montpellier, I was very bad playing the saxophone compared to young people. So after 1 or 2 months, I understood that, no, it will never happen. And so I was in Montpellier and I started to focus in my studies. And my studies were mapping, basically learn how to map things, use the electroconductivity kind of technology for agriculture. And one part of agriculture were vines at that time. We're talking 1997. And I ended up moving from Montpellier to Paris, to the agronomical center of Paris. I moved and I got, to help a PhD on terroir. So that was, to me, the first time that word, the word terroir came to my mind. And I was basically, the slave doing maps for that person.
Yeah, unpaid intern is what we say over here.
Yeah, the unpaid
Yes.
intern. But it was very interesting to me because for the first time, it was fun. I was invited to different tastings, first time for me. Cheese, wine, and also the concept as a piece of space can create a typicity was interesting to me. Not only on wine but food. There are not many terroir restaurants in the planet. In another life, I would love to have one terroir restaurant, with olive oil from limestone malt from Tuscany, or tomatoes from volcanic basaltic ash from Etna, because they have a sound again, or escargot from limestone in Burgundy, because if you move the escargot outside of the limestone, it's another taste. So it's the limestone, or truffles from limestone again in Cahors or in Barolo. So there is a connection on that sense, and that would be a killer restaurant, a niche restaurant in New York,
Sure.
And should be called terroir, and so a piece of space can create something was a topic that was interesting and fascinating to me. So that's how everything started. I came back to Chile, worked for 3 years in the university, got married, didn't have any money at all. The university was paying me very, very, almost nothing. And then when I asked for a better salary, they told me, no, because you need to have a PhD degree. So I reached out to my professor in Paris and I said, I have a problem. I'm married, I don't have money. I need to have a PhD. And he said, come to us, Pedro. We will be happy to welcome back. If you come back, you will be my last student because I will retire after you. And my topic is terroir. So that's how I came back to France in 2001 and did this PhD on terroir. That's how things went, at that time. And life is super, super weird, because I jumped into this wine world knowing nobody. And I was in Paris, trying to understand, and starting this program of terroir was very difficult because it was very conceptual. And every time you talk to somebody, then that somebody knew nothing. What is terroir? And the answer was ooh la la, ooh la la, ooh la la. And so I was quite alone. And then after 1 year, my professor said to me, Pedro, you need to start traveling and talk to people, talk to vigneron. You need to go in that direction. And I ended up in Bordeaux through a friend of mine, Chilean friend of mine, who was doing a PhD on geology. And that guy happens to be friend with a terroir consultant. So that's how, for the first time in my life, I was with somebody who was a terroir consultant in Bordeaux in 2002. And that's how I jumped into a pit with that guy in Chateau was Cos de Sonel. And that opened a window for me. There is somebody into a pit talking about things. I found that fascinating. That's how I end up.
And not even any pit, a second growth in Bordeaux. So it's like, yeah, you get to start seeing some of the best of the best for your beginning. Yeah.
3 or 4 months after that, my professor gave me an invitation to do a seminar in Burgundy. I never been in Burgundy. I never tasted Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. I didn't even knew what Burgundy was. Burgundy was me. I was not a wine person. So Burgundy was Dijon, moutarde, mustard. And I was in that seminar in Dijon, and frankly, nobody came. There was a room for 120 people, and 17 or 18 people attended to my seminar, who was basically an entry-level seminar at that time. And one of the people that came was younger than me, came down, talked to me, and invited me to, he told me, I am a young producer, blah, blah, blah. And he invited me to his place to talk about terroir. And that's how I went Burgundy, to the vineyards for the first time. And that guy, the only guy who talked to me was Louis-Michel Ligeveller from Von Romanet, so the owner of La Romanée. So the next day I was walking the vineyards of Von Romanet with that guy, and I was drinking wines for the first time, and I had zero experience how to taste a wine. The first Pinot Noir of my life was Le Clos du Château. So how lucky is that? Sometimes I think, let's say I want to be a pilot driver of Formula One. What are the possibilities that I run into a restaurant and I am in front of, I don't know, Niki Lauda?
Mm-hmm.
Zero. That doesn't happen,
Well, it's like liking pop music and hoping to walk into the mall and run into Taylor Swift. Like, to bring it back to Taylor Swift from before.
Yeah, of course.
You met the top of the top, like, whoa, okay, yeah.
But I didn't know they were the top of the top, Now when I look back to my life, now I realize how lucky. I mean, honestly, my first Pinot Noir was in that cellar. It was the first wine, the Clos du Château. And I came back to that cellar many times in my life. And I learned how to taste there with that guy who was younger than me. I'm 56. So Louis Michel today should be 51 maybe. So he was a young at the time, 26, 27 guy. So we were in that cellar trying the wines, And that's how a taste came to my mind and my person, that defines everybody that I do today. I go, it's like the movie Ratatouille. I go back always with my tasting to the beginning. And my first tasting was La Romanée. That cannot happen.
Well, awesome. Pedro, I think in the world of different consultants that you see, going to help different vineyards, I think you have a really unique and special spot. Just the fact that you are the terroir expert, but also the wine focused. And don't discount the jazz too. Bring a little music out. If someone was listening to this, because I do have to bring it to a close soon, where could they go to find out more about you, what you do, and maybe find your book?
So that's a good question. So people follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is not big. I don't have 100,000 followers. I have maybe 18,000 or 17,000. But very geek people. The people who follow my rocks and the histories are mostly sommeliers from everywhere in the planet, And it's a way I used to communicate to the people, I do short filmations of every terroir. So people can see, in a simple way, and I always put music behind. They can see how a Brunello di Montalcino Galestro looks like, or how a Barolo sandy limestone looks like, or, So there are many videos, about showing people that. And regarding the book, it's a good question because, again, I am not a writer, so I don't have a publisher, so I don't have a distribution. So basically, again, that ends up to be a niche book again. And I got an agreement in UK now with an urban winery who also has many wine bars in London. It's called Vagabond. So Vagabond is going to sell the book. So basically, I will put in Instagram, hello London, if you want to have the book, go to Vagabond. My importer, who is a super good importer in Spain, is going to sell the Spanish version. Spanish sommeliers and winemakers are very geek, so that is a good place for me, And then I'm looking for something in US to do it, So I'm contacting some. There are now some companies, small companies that know how to bring the book and distribute the book through internet, basically. So something that was new to me, that was ChatGPT who advised me, you should talk to this. So I'm starting to talk to them. Again, it's not a book to get money. I'm selling the book at the cost to the people who sell reselling to pay my investment, but it's a book to share, and so the book should be in September in the market in US. Perfect. And then I will hold some copies of the book, for sure. I know plenty of people in New York, and I will do 2-3 seminars to sell the book and talk about the book, and San Francisco as well. I would love to do one in Florida, one in Houston. That will be the easy part. The difficult part is to get that company to bring the book or a winery. Selling a book is like to selling a bottle of wine. My work is through Instagram to communicate that. If you want the book, go to that website, this winery, and then you will have. Then click, and people will have it. I don't want to go through Amazon.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have the volume to do that. And again, it's a funny book, but remains a niche book, and
that makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like to be, I'm not printing 10,000 copies, I'm printing 600 copies for US. It's not a lot. So.
In the show notes, I will make sure to link to your Instagram, and if you do of have info on where we can get it at some point, let me know, and I'll update the show notes. So
I will let you know, because that is how people, the geek community, and I love to use the word geek, the geek community or the niche community is important. I mean, people really, on wine create passion. And the sommelier community in the planet is super hungry and passionate. Not everybody, but you are some. And you run into. I mean, that's why I love New York, for example. I jump in New York and I can spend 2 weeks talking with people, because people is hungry about information. What is that, Pedro? What is this? And why? Blah blah, and different questions, And I love that communication with people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an example of, you get a slight interest 15 years ago, and then you just keep going and keep going. I'm sure the same way with you. So
yeah, it's the same. I mean, and that makes my life funny,
Mm-hmm. You got to do something with the time. But Pedro, thanks for taking a little bit of time in the dead of your winter to come say hi to our audience, and it was a pleasure to meet you. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Andre. I super enjoyed talking to you this cold morning of Sunday here in Concepcion, south of Chile.
All right. Cheers. Thank you, Andre. Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.